Hey guys, welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about fantasy football wide receivers. We've got Baskin, Halbert, and Brad back on the channel today, and the next video in the series will be our tight ends video. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe as it helps my channel grow, and I hope you enjoy the video. Welcome to our fantasy football talk wide receivers video. We're just gonna get started. Let's go. So starting with the wide receivers that we say to put on your radar in 2020, we're going to start with Brad here.
So I picked A.J. Brown. As Adam mentioned in the quarterback video, Corey Davis is not a good receiver in that system, and they don't really have anybody else besides Humphreys. And they just gave Tannehill that $100 million extension. They're going to want to throw the ball a lot more. And they have the run game with Derrick Henry and well, they lost Deion Lewis, but they have the run game with Derrick Henry to just take off all the pressure off of Tannehill and then just let him find his either deep threat or just let him run a slant and just let him get yards.
For me, I do not like A.J. Brown at all. I absolutely hate A.J. Brown. I do not think the Titans are going to be anywhere near how good they were last season. I don't think Ryan Tannehill will be as good, and I think that will affect his receivers poorly. I also think Derrick Henry won't be as good. That will also make the entire offense worse. I think A.J. Brown had over 1,000 yards last season, and I don't think he's a capable wideout to do that again. So I think his overproduction last season is going to cause him to underproduce in a way this year.
I think A.J. Brown, he reminds me a lot of a throwback Titan, Rashard Matthews, or they've had other guys, I think it was like Kenny Britt or something, where they always have that guy who was like 1,000 yards, and they just never repeat that success. I think Brown, he'll still be able to have maybe 900, 800 yards, maybe 7 or 6 touchdowns next year, but that's only worth is like a lower spot on your fantasy team, not where he's getting picked right now. So I agree with that.
Great. So Darius Slayton.
Okay, this is another sleeper pick. So Darius Slayton for me, I went to Giants games last year because I had season tickets, even though I'm a Broncos fan. I'm not flying out to Denver every weekend, but Darius Slayton, I mean, he was the one guy besides Golden Tate. I mean, he has okay hands, but Darius Slayton, he was the only consistent guy in that Giants offense because Saquon Barkley, he was a little injured last year. So I think Darius Slayton, he had a very good year last year. A lot of touchdowns with some mediocre quarterback play. Even though Daniel Jones, I mean, he put up decent stats. He fumbled the ball like every other drive. So that really hindered his play. And I think Daniel Jones will definitely take a step up. I don't think he'll get worse this year. I don't think he'll have over like 15 or 16 fumbles again. I mean, that would be terrible, but it could happen. But I think Darius Slayton will definitely have an improved year. I think he could have over 1,000 yards and over like 8 or 9 touchdowns. So I really do like him in that Giants offense. And I think he could have a lot of success this year.
For me, I hate every single Giants wide receiver this season. For me, there's no distinction between Golden Tate, Darius Slayton, and Sterling Shepard. They're all about the same guys. They're going to produce like 800 yards and 6 touchdowns each. I don't think there's enough differentiating one from the other. So I don't think that there's a clear number one wide receiver there in New York. You may say it's Darius Slayton because he produced the most. However, I don't know if he's the number one receiver in Daniel Jones's offense. So for me, due to that lack of distinction, I maybe take him as a late-round flyer, but not as a top 4 wide receiver on your fantasy team.
No, I'm not saying – I'd say he's more of a flex guy where you could maybe get him a little bit later, but right now he's a sleeper pick for me. So I do like Darius Slayton this year, but I think he will have a better year than Golden Tate. Sterling Shepard is injury-prone. So the thing is the Giants receivers, I mean, besides him, they always get injured. Evan Ingram's always injured, so – if they're all injured, I mean, they're going to have to throw the ball to someone, and I doubt it's going to be Benny Fowler, someone else at the bottom of their depth chart. So that's why I got Darius Slayton here.
Let's move on to Halbert's pick here with DK Metcalf. I support this pick, too.
Thank you. Okay, first off, it pisses me off how the Eagles could have drafted him and said we took J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. But with DK Metcalf, he did very good last year, and I know that a lot of people thought he would be a bust in the NFL because people thought he just had great combine numbers, but he wouldn't be able to produce. And but I think he did very good, especially considering that the Seahawks had Tyler Lockett, and he was still their second wide receiver. I feel like for the numbers he produces, he's being drafted too low for that. And I think he's going to have a very similar season to last year. And if he does, I'd be happy with that. Like, it could be like someone that you can get maybe at the top of your bench. You possibly could start him at a flex, or if you have a wide receiver 3 there. And I don't, and he hasn't and I just like this pick. He didn't really get hurt that much last year. So I don't see an issue.
Yeah, I agree with Alex too. I don't think I'll have a similar season to last year. I think I'll have an even better season than last year. I mean, this guy, his one weakness is route running, but he's a clear deep threat. I mean, I don't know how many people are going to stop. This guy is like 2% body fat. So, I mean, good luck trying to tackle this guy. So I love this pick.
Let's move on to my final wide receiver in Kenny Golladay. I absolutely love Kenny Golladay this season. He's going to be awesome. Last year, he led the league in receiving touchdowns with 11 of them. He had over 1,000 receiving yards. Mind you, he did that with 8 games from quarterbacks like David Blau and Jeff Driscoll. Just let that sit in. He led the league in touchdowns, and his quarterback wasn't even there for half the season. Matthew Stafford last year was on pace for about 35 touchdowns and 15 interceptions, which would have been insane. And if he's able to do that next year, look for Galladay's stats to skyrocket. He has room to grow. He is a big red zone threat. He's a good deep threat. He can catch the ball anywhere. He has a big catch radius. I absolutely love him. Take him in fantasy. He might not be that number 1 wide receiver on a fantasy league, but he's a high-end wide receiver 2 and a low-end wide receiver 1.
He was on my team last year. He was good. I take him again. That's all I got to say. He's a great player. Stafford was obviously injured. I mean, all they had is David Blow. So look out for Golladay this year. I think he is a wide receiver 1 this year in fantasy.
I'm just going to counter. I think he is a great receiver, but there are other pieces on his team, like T.J. Hawkinson and Kerryon Johnson, that he won't produce as well as he did last year. He'll still do fine, but I don't, depending on where he gets drafted, maybe hold off.
Okay, I think he's I like where Adam said he would go. I think I like him as a wide receiver 1, but kind of a lower one. If he's your wide receiver 2, I'd be very satisfied with that. And like you said, he's a big red zone threat. I think he'll get I don't know if I think he'll get around the same amount of touchdowns as he did last year. And I just don't, and I feel like he has a very high floor. Like, I think worst case scenario, he's a high wide receiver 3 maybe.
Great. Let's move on to the wide receivers we do not like in 2020, starting with Brad and the Bucs wideouts.
All right. So as I said in the quarterback video, I do like Tom Brady this year a lot, but I don't like that they have 2 really good receivers that both are kind of deep threats. I mean, Godwin could probably run the slant good enough to get the ball, so I'd draft him over Mike Evans, but I don't like that they have both of them, and Scotty Miller and Gronk and Cameron Brate and OJ Howard, and no run game that, they can't take the pressure off Brady. I do like Brady because he has all those weapons, but I don't like individually those weapons. If you can get them, if you can get one of them like mid-second, maybe go for him, but I just don't like that they're being drafted like 7th and 8th overall. I've seen them in some drafts. I just don't like it.
I want to add to Brad there. I absolutely love Mike Evans and Chris Godwin as football players. However, for fantasy, they just concern me. They're being drafted 13 and 14, early second round. For me, that's just too early. If you can get one in the back of the second round, maybe go for one. But I just don't see them as good enough separately to be dominant in fantasy leagues. They, for me, are low wide receiver 1s and very high risk wide receiver 1s. So if you're wanting a risk, then go for them, but I wouldn't take them in the early second round and definitely not in the first round.
Yeah, this is like a big high risk, high reward. Like, first to pick the right one, and then for that one to do good and produce, high risk, high reward.
Great. Let's move on to Baskin's pick here with DJ Moore.
DJ Moore, I think this year they picked up Robbie Anderson. I think Teddy Bridgewater, I don't think he's that good of a quarterback. I think he did well in that Saints offense behind Sean Payton. who's great with quarterbacks. I mean, he was known as a quarterback whisperer when he helped coach the Cowboys for a little. I think he was like an offensive coordinator there or something, QB coach. But I think DJ Moore, he had a lot of receptions last year, but that's pretty much what he was doing. I mean, he had decent production last year, but I think his numbers will kind of take a step back. I think he's more of a one-year wonder in that offense, and I don't love the Panthers this year that much at all. So I don't love DJ Moore in fantasy.
Yeah, I agree with that. For me, it's kind of like the same thing with what I said in the quarterbacks video. There are just other good wide receivers there. Curtis Samuel and Robbie Anderson are legit wide receiver options. There's not a lot of difference between DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel.
And we also don't know who Teddy Bridgewater likes the most. So
that's also true.
We don't know that.
So it's kind of like that New York Giants scenario where we have Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, and Golden Tate. There's just three wide receivers who are kind of capable of doing the same thing. Yes, DJ Moore is probably the clear number one target there, but I also like Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel. So I'd stay away from DJ Moore, especially how high people may be drafting him. I've seen him go in the mid-third round, fourth round. So I'd be wary if I'd be drafting DJ Moore.
Also, they have McCaffrey, who takes up a lot of targets. And they're probably going to lean on him a lot this year after giving that extension. So we'll have to see.
Absolutely. Let's move on to Halbert's selection here. Calvin Ridley.
Okay. So the thing with Calvin Ridley, I think the projections for him throw a little bit too high. He's probably one of the best wide receiver 2s in the NFL. But I feel like the Falcons overall, I think Matt Ryan, he's going to regress. And no matter how good Calvin Ridley is, he'll probably never be better than he's not going to be better than Julio for a couple years probably. And I feel like if Julio's there, Calvin Ridley, he's just not going to be able to be like consistently he's just not going to be consistently as good as people are saying that'll be. I think he'll have a couple monster games like he's had before, but I feel like he's too much boomer bust in my opinion.
But Calvin Ridley, I think he definitely has a ceiling of how far he can go. I don't know if he'll ever drop 1,000 yards as long as Julio is an elite receiver in that offense. So he's kind of stuck in that position where maybe his ceiling is what Michael Gallup did last year, but I don't know how much he'll actually do in that offense. So I think he's more of a guy you want off your bench, possibly a flex guy, but that's it. I mean, I wouldn't want him as my flex guy, but if you had a bad fantasy team, possibly, but not on my team.
Yeah. I like that analysis. Let's finally move on to the Cleveland Browns wide receivers. So OBJ and Jarvis Landry are some of my favorite wide receivers in the league. As you can see, I have a Jarvis Landry jersey hanging up right there. However, for me, this season, I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year. Firstly, Landry was surprisingly better than OBJ last year. He had more touchdowns and more receiving yards, but I think this year the emergence of Austin Hooper is really going to hurt them. Hooper was really big in Atlanta last season, and I think in Cleveland he's going to get a big target share that will take away from Landry and OBJ's production. So don't look for Landry to be a Pro Bowler again next season, and don't look for OBJ to just absolutely explode. Yes, OBJ will probably do better than he did last year, but I think that will come out of Jarvis Landry's targets and target share rather than Hooper's. So I think that stay away from the Browns receivers. I don't think either of them are good wide receiver 1 or 2 options. Maybe there are flex options or a wide receiver 3, but just be wary about them.
I agree with Landry, but I disagree with Odell Beckham. I think he definitely had a little trouble fitting into that offense last year. But I think Baker Mayfield, I don't think he'll do any worse than last year. I think he'll have a better season, and that means more production out of his number 1 receiver, which is Odell Beckham Jr. And I think that deep ball will be a lot better in that offense. I mean, that offensive line did get a lot better in free agency. They got Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills in the draft. So I think that will make a big impact, and I could see Odell Beckham being considered an elite receiver in the NFL again. So I would take him as a wide receiver 2 this year in fantasy.
I agree with Adam that I don't like either of them. And one reason for that is Nick Chubb. He exploded last year, and I think they're just gonna give him the ball. They're gonna give him the ball much more, and I feel like Odell Beckham. He's being a wide receiver. He's being drafted as wide receiver 1 this year. I think it's similar to the Buccaneers scenario where they take targets away from each other, and for the Browns offense, that's helpful, but in fantasy, it is not.
Now that you've reached the end of my video, I want to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe as it helps my channel out, and check out my other videos on my channel. Also, you can follow my Instagram, the link is in the description down below, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, see ya.